Alright, I have a real quick discussion-based video for you guys, and I just want to give my thoughts on the iPhone 16e. This is Apple's latest iPhone release that came out a few days ago on February 28th. And I've already made an unboxing video. If you guys want to check it out, I'll post a link to that down in the description. But basically, this video is going to be going over essentially some of my opinions on the 16e and who I think this phone is targeted at and or who it's for. So let's go ahead and get started. To start things off, just to give a recap of what the iPhone 16e is, it's basically a iPhone that just came out and is supposedly supposed to be Apple's cheapest iPhone that they currently offer, which is technically true. However, being that the price is currently sitting at about $600, personally, that is not a budget phone anymore. Essentially what this device is, to go over it again, it's an iPhone that's basically in the body of that of an iPhone 13, because the front here basically has the identical display to that of what is on the iPhone 13, which released back in 2021. Because you have that same notch, the smaller size notch, not the bigger size that was on the iPhone 12 a year prior. But the display is OLED, and it is a 60 hertz refresh rate display, and that's basically it. It's a good display, but it is definitely a lower quality than that of what you'd find on a more modern phone, or iPhone rather, such as the 16 and 16 Pro. So that's one area that Apple's basically cost cutting. Another area is the camera system, because you could see it's only got one camera lens compared to the 16 where it has two lenses and the 16 Pro has three. So basically what Apple's doing here is they've taken all of the camera lenses away and only added the wide lens, which is basically similar to how the iPhone SE was previously, because that phone only had one rear camera lens. So to basically get into my thoughts on this device, I'm going to start by saying it's not a bad phone by any standard, because it has the latest and greatest A18 processor, which is in the iPhone 16. So it's got the latest chip, which is good. Support-wise, it's going to be supported for many, many years to come, going off of Apple's history with iPhone support in terms of software. You can expect this phone to be great in that respect. And the overall hardware of this phone is great. The build is solid. The display is great because it is OLED. It does have good resolution and overall good viewing angles and things like that. One thing that's bad though on this display is the PWM, which stands for pulse width modulation, which essentially means the flicker of the display when you have the display brightness at a lower brightness will essentially flicker more, and some people can be a little bit sensitive to that and get some eye strain. So that's something to keep note of. Aside from all of that, it basically has all of the basic necessities that a smartphone would essentially need. It has a decent camera on the rear. It has USB-C, which is great. It no longer has lightning. The front has also, like I said, good display. The front-facing camera is great quality. Still has Face ID. So hardware-wise, it's a great phone. Software-wise as well, it's also a great phone because it's running the latest and greatest iOS 18 version. Being what you actually get with this phone for that $600 price, it is absolutely not worth it. $600 is way too much for this particular phone. It needs to be in the ballpark of around $400 to $450 in my personal opinion. Maybe even upwards of maybe $500, but that's kind of stretching it. I would be much happier if it was $400 to $450. So a price cut or price reduction badly needs to happen to this phone. Hopefully the next iteration or in the next year or two, this can drop in price, because right as it sits now, it's not worth buying at $600, because you can find used iPhone 16s and even used iPhone 15 Pro on eBay and refurbished and things like that for basically that same $600 price. And those phones are arguably better in a lot of other areas. Now the 15 Pro, speaking of that, is a year old. However, if you had the option of choosing between the 16E and the 15 Pro from 2023, I would personally say to go with the 15 Pro if you have that option, and if it's the same price, because you get way more features and it's just an overall way better phone, and you still get Apple Intelligence because the 15 Pro has support for the Apple Intelligence suite. One area that I would say that this phone would be recommended is for someone that currently has an iPhone SE 3rd generation and doesn't particularly care about features, whether it be hardware features or software features. They just want a new phone and they just want it to work well. That's where the 16E will come into play pretty nicely. So if someone has an iPhone SE and they want to upgrade, they are looking at this phone. It's simple and it'll work. One example, and I don't want to preface this as saying the iPhone SE or the 16E is targeted for older folks, but for older folks, this probably would be the better phone to get, because those folks don't care about features and they just want and or need a phone to work so they can stay in contact with their relatives or things like that. And they just want to do the basics of calling or texting and things of such. Now, to give one example, my grandfather, who still currently has the 2nd generation iPhone SE, he basically doesn't use his phone for effectively anything. He does the bare minimum, and which is he calls, makes calls. He will occasionally text, but that is a very, very rare. He essentially never texts unless I text him. So that's something. And he might play a little bit of a game on his phone. In his case, he likes to play solitaire. So he pretty much doesn't use his phone for much. And my grandmother's pretty much the same way. She does it a little bit more. She's actually more active in her texting and things like that. However, still does basically the basics. And neither one of them use their cameras essentially ever. They do not take a photo or a video of anything pretty much ever. And if they do, they always need help doing it because they don't know how to take the picture or whatever. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so again, for folks like that legitimately do not care and only use their phone for the absolute basics, this phone is great because it's a basic phone. Single camera lens on the front. Face ID is something that you basically can just set up once and then they don't ever have to worry about it ever again. It just always unlocks their phone without them thinking about it. Coming back to the price, it is really hard, even for someone that just wants a basic phone, it's really hard to recommend them to buy this because of it costing $600. Just coming back around to that, it's just insane because the SE was $430, which even for that phone was a lot because it was heavily outdated. But if this phone could have come in at that same $430 or $450, my goodness, that would be an absolute steal. And would be pretty much the phone to recommend for most people. So that is basically it. I don't want to make this video any much longer than it is already, but that is generally my initial opinion on this phone. Again, like I said, to recap, it's not a bad phone. It's actually a solid, pretty good phone, but an absolutely horrendous price. So that's where we stand with that. If you guys want to chime in the comment section below, you are more than welcome. I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on this because it's always interesting to see the viewpoint from others. And opinions from other people might obviously be different than mine, because that's just how things are. I mean, I might be thinking the price is too much. Someone else might be thinking the price is completely adequate and is totally fine. And so, anyway, that's basically it. Hit that like button. Smack the subscribe button as well. Greatly helps out the channel. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.